Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm SOJOURN and today we're talking about alien invasions, inspired by the ongoing Illuminate attacks in Helldivers 2. We all knew they were coming at some point, but them showing up live during the Game Awards was really cool. The in-game message alerts really hit that vibe of something massive and unexpected happening, because, well, it kinda was. That defense of Calypso, the planet they attacked, was something special. The stumbling around trying to figure out what was effective to defeat the new enemies, the anti-air missile sites smashing warp ships out of the sky, and the way we actually won the planet. It was just something so atmospheric and awesome to experience. It really captured that feeling of an alien invasion. After that defeat, the Illuminate switched to doing smaller hit-and-run abduction raids on population centers, hoovering up Super-Earth citizens to convert to the voteless to bolster their forces. Makes sense, right? But they're doing other things too outside of the population centers, like hitting up Super-Earth fuel depots, which is an interesting co-opting of local logistics that I'm not sure I've seen in many other alien invasions. They do something similar with the stratagem scrambling cognitive disruptors, which are plugged into local electrical generators on the ground. They're also up to something else, since they land at these Super-Earth dig sites. Are they there to stop us finding something, or looking for something of their own before their main forces arrive? And they will. The Meridia wormhole did change after the Illuminate resurfaced, and as of recording, the most recent thing is these space-time fluctuations began, indicating the potential arrival of more Illuminate forces. A bit like that moment in Halo Reach. You know the one. In general, quite a lot of Halo was about alien invasions. Yeah, 2 and 3 had you doing stuff on Forerunner installations a lot of the time, but good chunks of them are still about the Covenant attacking Earth, which starts really well in 2 with the surprise arrival that 3 and especially ODST follow up on. But Reach, well, Reach covered an entire invasion from the earliest probing attack through to its apocalyptic conclusion. But the bit everyone knows and references I mentioned already, and that showed the true hopelessness of the situation and the mighty power of the invaders, which in and of itself is a very common trope. But Reach really shows there was no heroic thing that could save the day. The Covenant were just too powerful. That slip space moment when they arrive is the best example of the incredible pacing and escalation in that game, and of all the individual triumphs and catastrophes that occur in war. Overall, it's probably one of, if not the best game about an alien invasion, and it's up against some stiff competition. There's the classics like XCOM and games inspired by it, but I want to talk about Half-Life because it's different due to being an almost accidental invasion, and the arrivals are appearing through portals rather than big, scary ships in the sky. And while that first invasion was stopped, it just paved the way for the unimaginably powerful Combine, who took the entire planet in just 7 hours in a war we never see. What happened is left up to the imagination, and it's great. Also, the Combine have cool tripods, letting me smoothly and sneakily segue to War of the Worlds. The original book is one of the first examples of the subgenre and lays out all the same notes they still use to this day. The safe home country turned upside down, the enemy being incredibly strong and normal people having to survive. Whether it's just because the book is public domain or the story itself has specific qualities that appeal to people, it's had a great many adaptations throughout the years. Some are a lot more well known than others. Orson Welles had his famous radio version, there was the 50s movie with the floating machines, Jeff Wayne's musical, and Spielberg's amazing movie. I don't really know where I'm going with this other than saying, wow, this story resonates with people, which I'll get into more later because next up is another fantastic example, Independence Day. I think it's so good for 2 reasons: how good the invaders' plan is and the build up to it. The first one, the plan, starts out with the aliens scouting ahead of the invasion. And yeah, you might think that the intel from the Roswell crash should have been outdated, but there's some survivorship bias going on here. It's entirely possible there were many other scout ships that just never crashed, which is how the aliens knew where to strike for the main event. This saw them positioning their superweapons before Earth knew they were a threat, letting them take out population centers, seats of government and military sites all in one fell swoop. Then when that's done, they were going to land troops to clean up what little resistance remained. The sequel kinda undid a lot of that, but that came out so far after it can be treated as a bit of a separate thing. The second great thing about the movie was its build up to all of that happening. A full third of this movie is spent on setting up characters and ratcheting up the tension, and there's even a literal countdown clock to destruction, though it takes a while for that to be uncovered. Now, not every invasion needs to have something like this to be effective, as we've seen with the Illuminate First Strike, but it's really a great way to introduce characters and to get people invested in them before the big stuff goes down, though again, this isn't necessary. Battle Los Angeles has its own bit of build-up, but the characters' introductions are fairly shallow. It's only through seeing their trials and tribulations as they take on a fairly near-peer force that we really become invested in them. Beyond the characters, this movie had some neat designs for the enemies. I liked the KKV-inspired flying machines they had, though the reason for the aliens arriving to harvest water was a bit strange. Yes, it's just a resource that we have lots of, used as an analogy for really any resource, but there's lots of water out in space. Comets, asteroids, planetary rings, entire moons. In fact, there's a lot of all sorts of materials out in space, and no people to fight to get them. It would have made more sense if they came to live in the oceans near the coast rather than harvesting them, and just happened to be belligerent about it. Another aspect of an invasion is what happens after. There's a good few bits of media covering this, and naturally they're all ones following successful invasions, and due to the overwhelming power of the invaders, they end up being pretty much post-apocalypse stories. Like Battlestar Galactica is about fleeing from total destruction, and yes, the Cylons aren't really aliens, but it does tick all the other boxes. As does the new war in Warframe, which shows the invasion itself from multiple points of view before moving on to the aftermath of it. There's other styles of invasion too, of course. Not everything is big and flashy. Sometimes things can be a lot more insidious, like the myth arc throughout the X-Files, where all sorts was going on in the shadows. Of course, this can also just be the first phase leading up to a military attack, as was the case with the Ori in Stargate. They were doing a good job of bringing people into their belief system, from which the Ori themselves drew power, but also used a plague to try to take down those who did not accept the religion. But all that was just a prelude to a full invasion through a supergate, with ships so powerful they were practically unstoppable. In some ways, this is kinda similar to what happened with Babylon 5. There was the third space movie with a more traditional alien invasion, but one of the show's main arcs was about the agents of the shadows sowing discord between the powers of the galaxy before the shadows fully showed up. And of course, Mass Effect took a lot of inspiration from Babylon 5, so there's a lot of similarities there, but the Reaper's invasion is much more invasion-y compared to the Shadows, who had a different agenda. So what is it about this type of media that makes it so enduring? I alluded to this earlier, but it seems to be the familiar, safe locations turned on their heads. If I put on my pointless hat for a moment, there's a lot of similarities here with kaiju and disaster movies. There's big spectacle mixed with seeing how regular folks survive. But there's a bit more to it than just that, I think, though I can't pin down exactly what it is that makes alien invasions such a persistently interesting concept for fiction. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate and spacefighter design reference books. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.